The news that the August test will remove this section is a huge relief. I'm currently a paralegal and planning to apply to law school. How can I best prepare for this new LSAT format? Also, are there any specific areas I should focus on more now that logic games are out? I want to take full advantage of this change to maximize my LSAT score. So yeah, I know a lot of people are really happy that logic games are being removed. For me, this is somewhat bittersweet because logic games was actually the most learnable section of the LSAT. So if you're intimidated by it, you may not need to be. I'd recommend giving it a good, serious try. You could spend a month or two focused on games just to start. Try spending a few weeks working on logic games and see if you can't get a big improvement. If you can, it might be worth trying to knock out the LSAT with the games section in April or June. If we look at the typical 170 scorer currently, they're getting perfect on games, maybe -1, and they're losing most of their points on each of the other sections, being logical reasoning and reading comp. That being said, if you just can't crack the logic game section, then by all means, go for August instead. You don't need to take it with the games, and law schools won't care whether you took it with games or without games. A benefit of taking it in August is that then there are only 2 sections to study, logical reasoning and reading comp, rather than the current 3 of games, reasoning, and reading comp. Plus, any gains you make in the logical reasoning section will be doubled because it's going to be across 2 sections. So let's say you improve at strengthening questions. Now there are double the number of strengthening questions on average that are going to appear on the LSAT that you can now get better at. So in terms of how to prepare for the new LSAT format without games, it's quite simple. Take all that time you would have spent on games and now spend it on logical reasoning instead. So logical reasoning becomes roughly 2/3 of the LSAT rather than only 1/3. I've got a question here asking, as someone who's been intimidated by the logic game section of the LSAT, in other words, for every 2 hours you spend studying logical reasoning, you spend only 1 hour studying reading comp, assuming that you're doing pretty evenly in both sections. In reality, logical reasoning is a bit more learnable than reading comp is, so you may want to spend even more than 2/3 of your time on logical reasoning just to start. And there are also roughly 15 different types of logical reasoning questions, including must be true, most strongly supported, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption, flaw, strengthen, weaken, method of reasoning, and so on. I also want to mention that while there are not going to be any major changes to the LSAT other than the removal of logic games, we may see some more subtle shifts in the logical reasoning section. Reports from students who took experimental logical reasoning sections recently indicate that there were more questions focused on numbers and percentages, meaning more numerical based questions dealing with things like proportions and such, and also more questions dealing with formal logic. So formal logic questions including must be true, sufficient assumption, and parallel, more questions where diagramming is helpful. It seems that LSAC is taking some of the underlying concepts that were being tested in logic games and incorporating them more into the logical reasoning section. So make sure that you're really clear on some of those tougher, more abstract logical reasoning question types. But don't worry about it. You have the whole summer to master the LSAT. I'm glad that you're starting so early now. You've got over 6 months. I typically recommend taking at least 5 to 6 months of LSAT studying to achieve your fullest potential, while most students try to knock it out in 2 to 3. More is better considering the importance of the LSAT. So I'm really glad to hear that you're devoting the time. You mentioned that you're a paralegal. I know paralegals can often work pretty long hours working overtime. And so if you can, try to reduce the overtime. If you can, let your boss know you're taking the LSAT, and they'll be understanding, of course, since it is the legal world, and maybe you'll be able to get out of the office at 5 and you can devote a bit more time to your LSAT studying. For anyone out there working full time, I typically recommend, if you can, squeeze in 30 to 60 minutes before work, the same amount of time during your lunch, and then 2 hours if you can after work during the week, and then of course do a bit more on the weekend. There are, of course, a wide variety of ways we could support you at LSAT Unplugged. If you are aiming to master the LSAT in August or whenever you're taking it, we have live online classes via Zoom, on-demand video courses, small group coaching, and one-on-one coaching. You can check out the links below this video to find out more and book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out and help you craft that study plan for August without the games or April or June with the games. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.